Yo, it's been a minute. Cam, Tripsy, and for today's video, this one's actually going to be a little bit different. Still going to be talking about photography, of course, but this one's going to be a little bit more broad. I'm really talking to any visual artist of any sort out there. For this video, I wanted to talk about how to turn any of your creative ideas into a reality. This is something that I've actually spoken about before. So on TikTok, I have this short series called Photography Talks, where I basically talk about anything photography within 30 seconds to I think 2 minutes max. This topic was one of the episodes, and when I did it, I felt as though I got the point across, but there was so much more I wanted to say and I didn't include, and I realized I could expand on it so much more that I decided to turn it into a YouTube video. So here we are, how to turn any of your creative ideas into a reality for my visual artists. There's a lot of ideas that we think we can't do, or there's a lot of ideas we have where we'll say, when I have the resources, and more times than not, you're really wrong. You'd probably be able to do that idea realistically with the resources you have around you. And I personally have a few tips that have helped me execute some of these ideas with little to no budget. So the first thing I would say any photographer or visual artist of any sort, graphic designer, 3D artist, videographer, photographer, whatever you do, needs to think of when they're trying to execute their idea is the lighting. This is the first thing you need to think about, because you have many things obviously that create a photo, which I'll get into later on in this video, but everything has to be lit up in a certain way. So like there's harsh light, there's soft light, there's highlights, there's shadows, there's whites, there's blacks, there's reds, there's blues, there's greens. All these different things you have to take into account. Lighting is a very broad thing, specifically when it comes to photography, because there's many different aspects to it. You have natural light, you have studio light, you have strobes, you have continuous lighting, you have different types of diffusers, you have reflectors, etc., so on and so forth. So this can get very, very technical. Do not get me wrong, this can get very difficult, but at the end of the day, your subject has to be lit in a certain way or a certain manner that you see it. And I'm saying all this to say, you have to take steps to figure out how you want your subject to be lit. The way something is lit not only can affect the vibe of what you're going for, but it can also affect the outcome of everything you do. In my eyes, the lighting really creates the image. You could have the most interesting subject, you could have the most interesting scenery. The lighting really makes the image in anything you do. You change the lighting around, it could completely change an entire image. And I think this is the first most important piece to think about. You see it in your mind and you see it in your head, and you only see it because you literally lit up the imaginary image in your head. But you have to think about how you're gonna light your subject. One main resource I've used in terms of getting help on lighting is YouTube and TikTok, two excellent apps that have a lot of tips and tricks for beginner, intermediate, and even expert photographers on lighting. I'm learning more about lighting not only as I shoot, but just as I go through my photography journey, and there's plenty of advice on those two apps alone. And also there's a lot of free photography books on lighting online. Now some of these books are older, so I'm not saying that the information is wrong, but it's not necessarily updated, and they might be using older equipment, or it might be on film if you're not shooting film, so things might be a little difficult to understand. But just the aspect of where the lights are supposed to be and how the end image looks could be a good starting point for you. Also, lastly, Elixir. I don't own Elixir, but I've seen videos on it. You can YouTube about Elixir, you can TikTok about it. An excellent app that can pretty much help you figure out any lighting scenario or any lighting look you want on any subject you have, which is my second point, the subject. I would say the subject is second because, like I said earlier, you can have the greatest subject of all time. You could be taking portraits of the greatest person ever walking this earth right now at this very moment, whenever you're watching this video. Now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, whenever you're watching this video. But if you don't have the proper lighting, it will not work out, especially not work out the way you want it to or the way you saw it. So now going back to the second point, the subject. Who is the subject? Who do you want the subject to be? Specifically for my photographers, especially those working on personal projects, there's always a certain look you want with any shoot. That's the purpose of it. The subject could be just anyone, right? The subject could be anybody you want it to be, it doesn't matter. And more times than not, when you start working on more personal projects, the subject becomes a lot more specific, right? This is something that in practice, I believe should always be specific. The subject doesn't even have to be a person. It could be trees. It could be a certain plant. It could be a certain animal. I just believe wholeheartedly in practice and in actual work you should want your subject to be as specific as possible, because it definitely adds to the tonality and meaning of whatever you're documenting. Maybe you want to shoot, I don't know, somebody you want to emulate a famous artist or a celebrity or athlete that passed away. You can find something close to it. I'm telling you, it's out there. You might have to pull some strings in terms of getting the people to do what you need them to do, or maybe getting people to create a certain look for what you want. And like I said earlier, you might find people that aren't models, and you might have to help a lot with posing. You might have to even hire somebody that is specifically doing that on set. But bro, you can get it done. I just think the subject needs to be as specific as possible to whatever you are shooting and you are trying to complete. So now, right, you have the lighting set up in your mind. You're probably figuring it out, and you're probably thinking of some models. If you're a photographer, videographer, so on and so forth. If you do graphic design, you probably already have the picture of the subject. If you do 3D art, you probably know who the subject is already, so you don't have to go looking for it. You can just create it, and you have to figure out a way to create it. If you paint, you just have to figure out how to paint the subject. If whatever you do, bro, you have to figure out the lighting, you have to figure out the subject, and then once you get those two things down, you have to figure out the location last. The location. This can be difficult at times because you might have a very specific idea and you might want the location to look a specific way. In that case, I would say start with set design. Maybe creating a set of the location you want, either from scratch or in a location that has aspects of the location you already thinking of in your head. I hope you're picking up what I'm putting down. I hope that was not too confusing, because I'm not cutting that part out. That made sense. Yeah, figuring out the location can be difficult, or it can be pretty easy. The location could literally be in your backyard. I've done a shoot in somebody's backyard, quite literally. Or it can be in a location outside your home. I've also done shoots in people's rooms. People have transformed their rooms or their siblings' rooms into sets. Something as simple as that. You might have this crazy vision of a war scene. I would suggest getting into set design, buying props, finding areas that have certain aspects of the image you're trying to capture and adding to it. Yeah, I'd also like to repeat again, the location doesn't have to be like this big thing, bro. It doesn't. The location doesn't have to be this big crazy thing. You can make great things shooting in a local park, shooting in the backyard, like I said, shooting around the corner from your house. Like, you can make something out of nothing, and you can add to a location, especially when you have the right lighting and the right subject. Even if you don't have the location perfect to a T, you can make do. I'm telling you, you can finesse. If you really want a location to be as perfect as possible that bad, you can go do some scouting. You might have to spend a little bit of money on gas. You might have to spend a lot of hours looking around. You might want to use Google Maps as a good friend before going to these locations. I do that a lot, even though locations change and look different. You can also look up areas on YouTube if they're like big monumental parks. I've done that as well. Again, some locations can change. I've had to deal with that, but it might not be too far off, or you still might be able to make do. At the end of the day, the location can be really easy or really difficult. You could want it really bad, or you can settle and you can keep it the way it is, or you can add to it. It's all up to you. But all in all, I feel like those are the three main things you need to make any of your visually creative ideas a reality. No matter what you do, 3D art, paint, you take photos, you're working on a movie, you draw, anything you can think of. You need to know the lighting. You need to understand lighting in general. Then you have the subject. No matter what you do, there has to be a subject. And then lastly, you have to figure out the environment. So like I said, there's an environment for anything, anywhere. You just got to make some shake, bro. If you want to complete that idea that bad, you will make some shake. I'm telling you, you will. Once you get these three things down, that'll pretty much lead you to anything else that you need, really. So from a photographer's aspect, right? Set design, which I've already brought up, stylists, MUAs, any assistants, any lighting assistants, things of that sort. Once you figure these three things out and you have a basis of what you want, you can approach people and further find ways to complete this vision that you thought of in your head the whole time. And you know, it's not impossible at all. I just think these three things are a great foundation to achieving any visual creative idea you have. And I stand by these three things: lighting, subject, environment. All in all these things are, you know, good, and you know, it all sounds good, and it's all like cool to talk about and cool to think about, and it's really cool to get motivated. But there's one more step, and step number 4 is really just getting started. You got to take some type of initiative and you have to get started, because even if you think about all these things, you cannot be afraid of failure, and you have to trust yourself, you have to trust your goals, you have to trust your vision. And even if you don't get things down to a T, you still made something out of nothing, you still learned, you still improved, and all in all, you wouldn't get any of that if you didn't just start. And yeah, man, I think that's pretty much it for me, bro. Like, you know, I've said enough. It's pretty much it. You just gotta get started. Lighting, subject, environment. Get as specific as possible for each 3 of those points, and watch you achieve every single visual creative idea you have ever set in your mind, regardless of the resources. Watch. You'll figure something out and you'll get it done. Appreciate y'all. Have a good day, morning, afternoon, evening, whatever time you're watching this. Appreciate y'all greatly, bro. And to the next one.